The world-famous Swedish chemist Alfred Nobel had the unfortunate experience of reading his own obituary. A French newspaper published his obituary with the headline, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." But it was a mistake. It was actually his brother, Ludwig Nobel, who had died.
Stay unbiased.
Although Nobel had introduced the powerful explosive dynamite to the world and made a fortune from it, he realized through that incident that he would be remembered as a merchant of death. Despite the peaceful benefits of dynamite and the wealth his invention had generated, it is said that this obituary left him with a deep sense of guilt. The reason for this was that the art of war had been transformed into an unprecedentedly destructive form through the production of dynamite, and millions of lives were lost as a result. However, Alfred Nobel focused his attention on getting rid of this feeling of guilt within himself and clearing his name, which was destined to be marked in black letters in history. His last will, written around 1895, reflected this realization. Nobel decided to dedicate his vast fortune to awarding prizes annually to individuals who had rendered the greatest service to humanity. He chose to award prizes to those who had made outstanding contributions on a global scale in 5 selected fields, based on the criteria of peace and nonviolence, scientific progress, intellectual and moral development, impartiality, and equality. He established the Nobel Prizes for peace, physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, and literature. Of these, the Nobel Peace Prize is the most important and directly related to his purpose. That is the main topic of our discussion today. Alfred Nobel, who defined the criteria for the Peace Prize very clearly and simply, emphasized that it should be awarded to the person or group of persons who had done the most service to fraternity between nations, the abolition of standing armies, and the holding of peace conferences. However, by the beginning of the 20th century, the global geopolitical landscape had become far more conflict-ridden and power-driven than the peaceful world Nobel had hoped for. Historical research shows that, especially after World War II and the onset of the Cold War, Western states gradually began to use Alfred Nobel's concept to achieve their own narrow goals. The fact that the Norwegian Nobel Committee had the power to define what peace meant had a clear impact on this. Critics argue that the appointment of members of the Peace Committee by the Norwegian Parliament indirectly opened the door for Western political leaders to intervene in the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize. Whether peace is defined as the absence of war or as the establishment of Western liberal democracy seems to have become a decisive factor in awarding the Nobel Prize. Today, the Nobel Peace Prize is no longer just a humanitarian award, but, according to many critics, has become one of the most powerful weapons in the Western geopolitical arsenal. To understand how the Peace Prize has adapted to the Western geopolitical agenda, we need to look back at history. The argument here is not that all Peace Prize winners are unworthy, but that there is often a strong political motive behind the selection of those deemed eligible for the prize. The awarding of the Peace Prize to Andrei Sakharov in 1975 and Lech Walesa in 1983 was not simply recognition of their work in the field of human rights. It is generally accepted that the selection of such individuals was a powerful form of support for achieving specific goals in the ideological war waged against the Soviet Union. This was clearly a strategy adopted by Western powers to intervene in the internal affairs of the Soviet Union through moral and social influence. Apart from these two individuals, organizations such as Amnesty International and several others who indirectly opposed the Soviet Union also received the Peace Prize from time to time. This trend was strongly evident throughout the 1970s and 1980s, culminating in 1990 when Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. However, the fact that within just 1 year the Soviet Union was dissolved demonstrates the extent to which the Nobel Peace Prize had been politicized at that time. It is no secret that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the world became unipolar, the Nobel Peace Prize became a tool for consolidating Western hegemony and spreading the neoliberal agenda globally. The most notable example of this was the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994 to Palestinian leader Arafat and Israeli leaders Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. The prize was awarded in recognition of their role in making the 1993 Oslo Accords a reality. Although it was said that the agreement was signed to end the Palestinian conflict and establish sustainable peace, what is happening in the Gaza Strip today is no secret to you. Therefore, there is no debate that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded for a peace that never came. Critics argue that the ulterior motive for awarding the 1994 Peace Prize was to suppress the popular uprising known as the First Intifada and to legitimize the existence of Israel. Today, the Oslo Accords have completely failed, and a more serious conflict has emerged, calling into question the true value of the prize. Similarly, Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991, remains a controversial figure. The Western media portrayed her as a goddess of democracy because she fought against military rule. The Nobel Peace Prize awarded to her was seen as part of Western pressure on the Myanmar regime. However, when she later came to power, she justified the genocide against the Rohingya Muslims, once again questioning the value of the Peace Prize she had won. The question arose as to whether she truly represented human rights or was merely acting out a political script desired by the West. The fact that Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States, received the Nobel Peace Prize within just 9 months of taking office was a serious deviation from its original purpose. Although no peace process had yet been conclusively achieved, he was awarded the prize for his promises of world peace made during his election campaign and in his policy statements. It is said that his concepts regarding complete nuclear disarmament and multilateral diplomacy were the main reasons for his eligibility. However, awarding the Nobel Peace Prize for future hopes is completely contrary to the criteria of service that Alfred Nobel envisioned. The irony here is that this Peace Prize laureate later ordered military operations and thousands of airstrikes against many countries, including Libya, Syria, Yemen, and Pakistan, as the U.S. president. Furthermore, the awarding of the Peace Prize to Henry Kissinger, a former U.S. Secretary of State, in 1973 is considered a black mark in the history of the Nobel Prize. Although the prize was awarded in recognition of his mediation in the peace agreement that ended the Vietnam War, it is no secret that Kissinger encouraged his state apparatus to drop illegal and banned bombs on Cambodia and Laos, even while the agreement was being signed, simply because those countries supported Vietnam. Moreover, Kissinger is also considered a person who directly contributed to the overthrow of democratically elected leaders like Salvador Allende in Chile through brutal military coups. What service he rendered to peace remains a questionable issue even today. Accordingly, the Nobel Committee itself seems to have realized that peace is something appreciated only when it aligns with the Western geopolitical agenda. Against this backdrop, the Nobel Peace Prize was recently awarded to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. She herself declared that the rightful recipient of the Peace Prize should be U.S. President Donald Trump, which is the reason for the creation of this discussion today. However, to understand the reasons behind it, we must first understand the geopolitical importance of Venezuela. But to prevent this video from getting too long, I'll end it here for today. In the next video, we will discuss the geopolitical importance of Venezuela and the underlying purpose of awarding the Nobel Peace Prize to Maria Machado. Don't forget to share your thoughts on this video in the comments below. If you haven't joined our channel yet, please subscribe by clicking the red button below and turning on the bell icon so you'll be notified when we post a new video. That's all for today. Have a great day, everyone.